The crowbar, bearing a bloody handprint, clatters to the soft earth below. Not long ago, this same crowbar had been striking against the side of an unassuming house, but it would not get the chance to unleash another blow. The two vandals, wielding a spray can and a hammer, respectively, stare on in horror at the terrible fate befalling their friend. The third vandal, who had been holding the crowbar until moments ago, is seizing and spasming, his feet suspended a foot above the ground. A large, organic tendril is impaling him through the chest, rendering him a human shish kebab, his shirt soaking through with blood. The tendril is emerging like some organic appendage from the outer wall of a nearby home, the ultimate security system. But the horror isn't over. As though in a nightmare, they find themselves frozen to the floor. But it isn't just fear. They look down and see that roots are growing up through their shoes, up through their feet. They are quite literally rooted to the floor. But this is nothing compared to what's happening to their skewered friend. But before we go any further, I have a question for you. Are you feeling like something's off? Is something getting in the way of your happiness or your goals? You don't need a clinical mental health issue to benefit from therapy. Sometimes life's challenges are enough. Therapy gives you tools to approach life differently, and it's a sign of strength to seek help when you need it. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make starting therapy easier by making it more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a questionnaire, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a couple days. If your therapist doesn't feel like the right fit, you can switch anytime at no additional cost. BetterHelp makes it easy. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5-star rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. If you're struggling, consider therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/DrBob to get 10% off your first month. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. As I was saying about the friend who was literally skewered by a mysterious tendril, he is rotting, decomposing at impossible speeds. The tendril impaling the decomposing vandal recedes into the wall, taking the vandal with it, absorbing him. As the vandal is absorbed, the cracks he'd made in the wall with his crowbar seem to repair themselves like a healing wound. His matter, perhaps even his very soul, has become one with the village that he had once aimed to desecrate. The vandals had never expected the village to fight back. With the former crowbar wielder dispatched, the village turns its attention to the other two vandals. The one holding the spray paint can is the first one to go. The ground puckers around his feet, the roots gripping tight and dragging him into the earth like quicksand. He screams for his friend to help him, but the dirt soon chokes out his words. Even if the only surviving vandal wasn't also rooted to the floor, there was nothing he could have done to save his rapidly sinking friend. As the spray can vandal is consumed by the earth, the vandal with the hammer feels a surge of adrenaline coursing through his vital systems. With tremendous force, ignoring the terrible pain it causes him, he yanks his feet away from the roots, some roots being pulled from the earth, others yanked out of his feet. His shoes filling with blood, he turns and runs towards the edge of the village. Even though he's lost his friends, if he gets out, he can tell people, he can stop all this. But he doesn't count on the houses around him, developing another modification. Strange, organic sphincters that spit out small bone-like darts at high speeds, sticking into the vandal's back. Some unknowable chemical leaches from the darts into the vandal's muscles, paralyzing him. He collapses to the ground, foaming at the mouth, as another long tendril reaches out, grabs him by his wounded feet, and drags him back to the village. There's a price that needs to be paid. Since its discovery, the SCP Foundation has assigned the designation of SCP-1135 to an anomaly located in an unnamed village in India. Any name historically associated with the isolated village, as well as its exact location, have been stricken from all public records and redacted even within the Foundation's own database. All previous residents living within the area prior to its acquisition by the Foundation have since been expelled from the area, relocated, and rehomed, as well as provided with sufficient doses of amnestics to prevent knowledge about SCP-1135 reaching the public. The area surrounding SCP-1135 is noted as having a few irregularities for a village in this particular region of India. The houses of the village are built around a Hindu temple, as well as local places of commerce. However, researchers have noted the usual structure of the buildings as being inconsistent with other Indian architecture. For one, the roads leading into and through the village, and for 2 kilometers around it, are fully paved with asphalt concrete. In addition, the houses are much larger than those found elsewhere in the region, and show signs of being constructed using far more technologically advanced methods and materials than are seen even in neighboring townships. Each building in the vicinity of SCP-1135 is furnished with running hot and cold water, working electricity, and sewerage, all of which are considered uncommon in the area. Though the Foundation has conducted extensive research in and around the village, personnel have been unable to determine exactly how the electricity is able to reach these buildings. There is no functional infrastructure, as is seen in places that are provided power via electrical grids, nor is there any form of rudimentary system in the area generating electricity. Researchers have been unable to locate any form of generator that could be powering the village's homes, and it has been surmised that they instead receive electricity as a direct result of SCP-1135's anomalous properties. After conducting further investigations into the structure of the buildings in the area, Foundation personnel have discovered that the materials used in construction are not only unique to the village, but are also seemingly organic in nature. Each structure in the area affected by SCP-1135 is made from what appear to be strands of organic fiber that run through each and every building. In fact, and of the permanent fixtures within the village, excluding anything brought in and placed by the Foundation, consists of these same fibres. These strands never affect nor threaten the structural integrity of any of the buildings and extend into the ground for about 3 meters down, like the roots of a plant. Extensive spectral analysis and excavation of selected areas surrounding SCP-1135 have unearthed that these organic fibers are connected, forming a network underneath the village itself. They're able to grow and perform self-repair at an impressive rate, as well as absorbing nutrients from the soil, again functioning as the roots of many flowers and trees would. You see, SCP-1135 isn't a village. It's just something that looks like it. Something alive. SCP-1135 is one big living organism. This has led to those working among the research team to colloquially refer to the anomaly as the living village. Researchers have noted that SCP-1135 shares similarities with certain strains of fungi, albeit much larger and seeming to not require the same low-light conditions that many fungi thrive in. The fibers that SCP-1135 consists of have been seen during testing, generating a wide variety of organic and non-organic materials around themselves. This, according to Foundation researchers, has been what has allowed the fibers to form the structures found within the village, as almost a form of active camouflage. A research assistant working on site even likened it to the defense mechanisms of certain insects, such as stick bugs or Caligo urolacus, commonly known as the owl butterfly, for the distinctive markings on its wings that resemble the face of an owl in order to ward off predators. However, one anomalous entomology expert assigned to SCP-1135 took particular offense to this observation, expressing incredulity at the notion that a creature would disguise itself as a village in order to hide itself. This was already known to have drawn human beings into the area, as SCP-1135 had even been an active community prior to the village being acquired by the Foundation. The entomologist, in a fit of rage, hurled obscenities at the research assistant and forbade him from ever speaking again. The fibers that SCP-1135 consists of are known to be able to repair themselves, and can thus repair the structures found within the village. Periodically, new instances of these organically grown buildings will start to emerge from the soil, maintaining their structural integrity at all times during this process. Thanks to the use of hydrochloric acid to prevent expansion of the affected area, SCP-1135 remains confined within the perimeter established by the SCP Foundation. As what seems to be a direct result, when space is limited, older structures within the village will appear to collapse and disintegrate before making way for new ones to grow in their place. When this occurs, the fibers within these older structures atrophy as the building, for lack of a better term, dies. In order to survive, like all living organisms, SCP-1135 requires some form of sustenance. Initially, the research team stationed there assumed that this was done entirely by the fibers absorbing water and nutrients from the soil. However, this alone is not a substantive enough food source to allow SCP-1135 to continue living. The anomaly's main source of sustenance wasn't initially discovered until an incident involving the aforementioned research assistant and anomalous entomology expert. Clearly still highly offended by the research assistant's statement about SCP-1135's camouflage, the entomologist took a jeep down one of the asphalt roads leading out of and away from the village. Unbeknownst to the rest of the research team, the entomologist followed the road to its end, arriving at some isolated scrublands, an area that stays dry and hot during the summer months, but avoids becoming a desert in the winter thanks to cooler, wetter weather. While alone in the area, the anomalous entomology expert overheard a sound, almost like a sizzling noise. Identifying it quickly, he recognized it as the warning sound produced by a certain variety of snake as a warning to ward off threats. He investigated further and encountered a wild echis, known locally as the saw-scaled viper or the carpet viper. Aware that these were venomous and responsible for causing the most snakebite-related deaths in the world, the entomologist was able to capture and secure the wild snake, an action he would later describe as being not very well thought out. Returning to the living village, it had already gotten dark by the time the entomologist arrived back at the Foundation's field headquarters with the saw-scaled viper in tow. The rest of the research team had retired to their quarters for the evening and were all asleep. Under the cover of darkness, the entomologist released the captured saw-scaled viper into the research assistant's bunk as the man slept, as retribution for his earlier statement. Surely enough, the saw-scaled viper bit the sleeping research assistant and injected him with a lethal dose of its venom, killing him. In a panic, the severity of his actions setting in, the entomologist hurriedly dragged the assistant's body to the outskirts of the village and hid it in one of the buildings. The next morning, it didn't take long for the remainder of the researchers to notice their assistant was missing. While nobody suspected foul play, a sweep of the area was conducted and the research assistant's body was discovered, or rather, what was left of it was. Seemingly overnight, the body had decomposed at an extremely accelerated rate, almost withered beyond all recognition, as if it had been drained. The deterioration of the body, strangely, had produced no noticeable odor, as the breakdown of gases involved in human decomposition usually do, leading a portion of the research team to examine the remains closer. Through doing so, they discovered how SCP-1135 feeds. The fibers from the building the research assistant's body had been left in had latched onto the corpse and were using the dead tissue, cells, and other organic matter as a source of sustenance. It turned out that in addition to pulling water and nutrients from the soil, any biological waste left in the boundaries of the village became a food source for the living village itself. This applied to any variety of waste present in the area. It was because of this, one researcher realized, that nobody had seen any animal carcasses or excrement anywhere within the village. SCP-1135 had been absorbing and eating it, as it was now doing to the research assistant's body. Upon hearing not only that the dead research assistant had been found, but that his remains were being decomposed and consumed by SCP-1135, the entomologist vomited, waste that was also absorbed by the living village, and later confessed to the murder. He was placed on probation and given a 2-year ban from fieldwork, including expeditions to anomalous areas. Initially concerned that they would be next on the organism's menu, the surviving remainder of the research team investigated SCP-1135's consumption process further. Testing themselves for any potential deficiencies or unnoticed losses of tissue, they found no sign that the organism had been secretly using them as food too. It seemed to only affect dead organic tissue, or anything that was no longer serving a biological use to anyone within the living village. All the waste matter in the area was decomposed quickly, with no telling signs like smells, and typically left little trace afterwards. Researchers concluded that the organism later converted this waste into nutrients for itself through some unknown anomalous process. What they were unable to determine was how SCP-1135 was able to differentiate between waste matter and other still living matter. The first suggestion to the research team that the living village wasn't quite so similar to an organism like a plant as first thought, but could potentially possess some form of sentience or even intelligence. It was then noted that certain structures within the boundaries of the village that began to disintegrate usually did so if SCP-1135 had gone a significant amount of time without feeding. It was able to use the buildings constructed from its own fibers as an alternative food source. Inversely, as was seen after the living village ate what was left of the research assistant, consuming a larger amount of waste triggered the growth of new buildings, or the evolution of improvements in existing ones. Noticing the rapid growths of new buildings post-feeding, members of the research team proposed a series of invasive tests to the affected area of SCP-1135. They'd seen the living village deconstruct its own mass for use as food, and wanted to determine how the anomalous organism would react when the fibrous structures were damaged by external factors. Based on the way the fibers had behaved so far, it seemed to be a logical assumption that any damage inflicted to buildings within the living village would just regenerate. However, the way in which the organism responded to the research team's experiments was far from being so predictable. Inflicting minor damage to any of the living village's structures was, as had been anticipated, soon corrected by the fibers. However, repeated or substantial enough damage caused the anomalous organism to create new constructs with its fibers, in the form of elaborate traps that it used to injure, drive away, or in extreme cases, kill its attackers. Multiple members of the research team examining SCP-1135's defensive responses suddenly found themselves tumbling into pitfalls that seemed to form right under their feet in seconds. Others weren't so lucky. During an experiment that involved striking at one of the SCP-1135's buildings with a sledgehammer, the researcher wielding said implement was witnessed suddenly stopping mid-swing of the hammer. Upon closer inspection, it appeared his heart had been pierced by a number of spiked caltrops that had burst out of the wall and impaled his body as he struck at the organic fibrous building. Attempts were made to treat his injuries, however, the trauma to his major arteries was too severe. Before the rest of the research team could begin to start making preparations for a burial, SCP-1135 had already started its process of decomposing and consuming his body, identifying it as more waste to be broken down for nutrients. Thanks to an autopsy conducted by researchers on site, the caltrops and other deadly contraptions made by SCP-1135 to deter attackers were determined to be far more complex than any other naturally evolved defense mechanism. Far from possessing poison to kill predators or camouflage to hide from them, more and more of the research team began to suspect that SCP-1135 possessed some form of intelligence. The traps it could make were the kind that would take a human with a high degree of intelligence and skill to make. Further examination determined that if they remained untampered with, traps produced by the organic fibers of SCP-1135 would disintegrate within a time frame of between 20 and 30 days, unless being triggered. Unless damaged repeatedly or substantially enough, however, SCP-1135 displayed no active hostility towards human life. On one occasion, during preparations for confining SCP-1135 to the area within the security fence, a measure of diluted hydrochloric acid was accidentally spilled on one of the structures, causing a temporary panic among researchers that the living village would retaliate with more traps. However, again signaling a degree of intelligence, the organism seemed to be capable of differentiating between damage that was caused indirectly and intentionally, as well as damage inflicted by living organisms or by other natural forces. While all of the findings of the research team have heavily suggested that SCP-1135 possesses a degree of human-like intelligence, this remains unproven. Discovery of SCP-1135 had taken place some undisclosed date prior to the Foundation's arrival in the area. A reporter who had been investigating aid efforts in the region of India where SCP-1135 is situated overheard rumors from local residents that described a place where buildings had seemed to grow overnight. Various interviews with eyewitnesses pointed the reporter to the living village, wherein a small population had gathered and were now living. Before information about SCP-1135 was able to be made public, operatives working for the Foundation intervened and were able to keep the village's discovery a classified secret. When conducting their intervention at SCP-1135, the Foundation's operatives conducted interviews with local residents who reported that the village had possessed anomalous properties for only a few years. The reporter, who had been detained for further questioning by the Foundation, had been following a story relating to a sustainable housing development scheme that had been conducted in the area. According to the information unearthed by the reporter, this scheme had been responsible for the creation of SCP-1135 and had been conducted by an organization known as the Mana Charitable Foundation. However, as far as the SCP Foundation were able to ascertain, there existed no such charitable organization, and any attempt to identify people involved in the scheme were unsuccessful. Unbeknownst to the SCP Foundation, the Mana Charitable Foundation was far from a fictitious organization. Although their existence has been kept from the Foundation through cognito-hazardous means, the truth is that the Mana Charitable Foundation is a non-profit and non-government organization that intends to use anomalies in order to provide humanitarian aid and emergency relief to various underdeveloped areas around the world. As the largest international paranormal charity in existence, Mana Charitable Foundation has been responsible for the creation of numerous useful SCPs that have been contained by the Foundation, SCP-1135 being among them. One strange occurrence was recorded some time after the Foundation acquired control of the area. This took place during one of the routine observational checks carried out by research teams. A number of the Living Village's buildings had grown what appeared to be security cameras on their outer walls, and in certain indoor areas as well. These cameras have been observed watching the waste disposal teams as they move through the village to deposit SCP-1135's food. Beyond tracking their movements, the cameras have done little to disturb Foundation personnel inside SCP-1135. Requests to dismantle and examine the internal workings of these cameras are currently pending approval from Site-43's administrator, Dr. Regal. Every 3 days, a research team assigned to SCP-1135 will perform a series of checks of the area within the security fence. All research personnel on site are reassured that they are not to take any precautions that would otherwise be necessary for entering a hostile environment. Researchers are dissuaded from carrying weapons on their person while checking the area within the security fence. However, they are required to be in possession of a two-way radio communicator at all times. Additionally, each member of Foundation staff is advised to maintain constant visual contact with another fellow researcher, just in case the Living Village feels like having a late-night snack. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-5853, Tiki Taffy Town.